On Sunday, September the 9th, everything started out pretty normally for me. A good friend, Peter Dodenoff, a paddleboard instructor, and myself have been talking about a plan to paddle around Okanagan Lake, a distance of about 280 kilometres, and doing it for charity. We decided as a test we would do a 25-kilometre paddle from Peachland into Kelowna. It was a beautiful sunny afternoon, but before too long the winds had picked up and we were soon riding some really nice waves in the middle of the lake. For me personally, I think it was my third or fourth time on a paddleboard, that ended up being just a little bit challenging, and so I got wet more than a couple of times. The winds earlier in the day were forecast to be calm as we checked, and it wasn't too long before we realised it was far from a calm day. In fact, as we started to approach Kelowna, we could clearly see that the kiteboarders were out in full force, sure indication that the winds were blowing strong. And then at some point Peter said to me, "There's something wrong, we need to get off the lake." And as I looked around, I saw one of the most horrific sights. There was a huge fire that had developed right by my house in Peachland, and there was nothing I could do about it. We were now 13 kilometres from Kelowna. It would take us a good hour and a half to paddle that distance on the boards. Frankly, I wasn't sure I'd even get home. The highways were starting to close, the smoke was thick, and this fire that you can see here was 500 metres as the crow flies from my house. We were very fortunate in one sense that we weren't evacuated. We were one small street of homes that weren't evacuated that particular day in Peachland. And thankfully we have a very dedicated team of forest fighters, firefighters, helicopter pilots and companies who are on standby for this type of an event. For a little while it was like living in Good Morning Vietnam as planes and helicopters flew overhead and struck the fire with absolute full force, attempting to knock it down early in the evening. The big fight that they were fighting was less so with the fire and more so with the winds. We live in a valley where there's katabatic flow, and so early afternoon the wind starts to flow downhill out of the valley. It's been a cause for a few plane accidents this year as people struggle to get out of that valley flying up it. On this day it was beneficial for us because it blew the fire away from our house, but it gave Peachland a tremendous challenge as it blew the wind straight down into the town of Peachland. The brave pilots in the water bombers and the helicopters using spotter planes overhead would fly straight into the smoke, and knowing that the terrain would be sloping away from them, they dropped fire retardant on some very important areas to protect properties.
When you came down the hill, could you see where it had...
As darkness fell, it was clear that there was still a fire to be tackled, and while a few firefighters remained on the ground, there's precious little that they could do overnight. And so we waited for the morning to see what it would bring. Thankfully, and once again to our benefit, overnight there was some rain, and in the morning damp and cool conditions allowed the firefighters to get an upper hand on the fire.
The lure of illusion will come from without, exciting and going, a doubt in the now. Fiction and fantasy, figures of speech, a narrow projection, rolling illusion. Now it's time to let go, still you want to hang on, but from missing the point to missing someone you can always deny. The feeling has gone from the lens to the retina, something went wrong.
So thanks to an amazingly dedicated group of people, I live to paddle another day, and I still have a house to live in. The Okanagan is an absolutely wonderful place to live. It's great. It's got recreational opportunities galore, as you've seen in some of this video. I do love living here, but there is a constant threat of wildfire in the summer. So for now it's back to training for me as Peter and I plan the SUP for life. watch out for more news on that coming up in July. It's going to be a really exciting family-oriented festival in July 2013, and it will kick off this fun adventure paddling around the lake and dropping in at schools and hotels and clubs along the way to talk about how blessed we are with such wonderful clean water in the Okanagan Valley, and how people around the world struggle just to get a glass of water coming out of the ground. So it's going to be a really exciting time. We're looking forward to it, and let's hope that next summer we can have a quiet forest fire season and nothing as bad as this, as life returns to normal for us.
An ocean of emptiness ebbs without love. Now it's time to let go. Still you want to hang on, but from missing the point to missing some.